how you doing? It's Colin Daniel here from riffninja.com. And I'm in the mood to answer questions from my students today, so that's what I'm doing with this lesson. And this is a question from my student Ironclaw, and his question was, what's the best way to use my practice time? Ooh, yeah, that's a good question. Well, depends on where you want to go and what you want to do. But don't practice things you're good at. Practice things you're weak at. So anything that you're weak at that you want to play or learn, that's where you have to start. A good itinerary is to, like, some people need more organization than others. Depends on their personality. I'm extremely creative when I practice. I like to write a lot of songs, and I'll do all kinds of different, every day will be a different practice day for me. If there's something I want to learn, like a certain riff or a song, then every day I'll take that riff or that song idea. Say, for example, I'm learning a new song and I'm struggling at it. Instead of pounding my brains into the ground, trying to get the song in one practice session, I'll just take a little bit of it. I'll listen to it. Say I'll listen to it in my car when I'm driving to the studio or to work or whatever I'm doing. I'll listen to the song over and over, and then I'll start taking the song sections bit by bit, working on the riffs or the movements that I'm having difficulty with. So don't try to get the whole thing at once. It's like, you know, the guy that wants the hamburger, he's going to go out in the field and chase the cow with his axe. You're not going to eat that whole cow, buddy. You know, you just want a little chunk of it. You'll choke on it. So it's too much to handle all at once. You want, I prefer veggie burgers anyways, you know. So you can have the cow if you want. I want the veggie burger. But what I'm saying is, you know, don't chew off any more than you can take as far as information, and don't expect everything out of yourself right away. Good things to start with. If you're a very beginner, you just want to start by getting your chords clear, you know, picking through the notes in your chord, getting the sound nice first. And when you get the chords sounding nice and you get familiar with the chords, you know, like if you've got a good teacher, the teacher will show you a group of chords that sound nice together and tell you to work them over. You know, you can take the chords out of a song that you're learning and just work the chords over in every changing order that you can think of. That's good practice too. You got to be creative with your practice that way. Ways of warming up are practicing scales. I like to practice this chromatic scale to warm up my fingers and get them happening, and concentrate on my down-up picking. And I'll practice them at different speeds, slower or faster, and I usually use a metronome for that, or a drum machine, which is my favorite trick, because a digital drum machine is smack on the money. You don't have those little wind-up metronomes that if you sit them on a bench somewhere and the bench isn't quite straight, then your metronome doesn't click evenly because the pendulum swings one way and takes longer to come back than the other because of the distance, right? So I use digital usually. Digital time references is better. And as I'm talking to you, I'm actually warming up right now. I'm just working with this cheater chromatic scale. So scale's a good way to warm up. You have to break up your practice time into the amount of time you have. As you get older and you've played longer, you'll be less into the traditional part of the practice. But I read lots about a lot of good players that still say they practice the scales to warm up, to keep their chops up, work on certain scales, certain fingerings. So scales are really good to warm up with, for sure. Practice the chords you need to practice. Get them nice and clear. If you're learning a song, practice the groups of chords, you know, that you need to get to the song. Don't try to get the strum, the picking pattern, everything down at once, you know. Take them a little bit at a time. If you're learning a solo and it's a lengthy solo or it's a difficult solo, don't try to get it all at once. Go for the first few bars. Work on that until you got that familiar. So you take one step at a time, right? Rather than taking these big leaps and trying to swallow the whole cow in one dinner. You might want to save some of that in the freezer for later, right? When you get hungry again. You got to take time. You got to take your time. You got to give yourself time. How much time to practice? Again, there it depends on what you want to do with it. I recommend 3 hours of practice a day for somebody that's a semi-professional that wants to get fairly good on the guitar. And the reason why I recommend that is you don't have to do it all at once. Either that's the other thing. You're always banking the time. You can do it in sections depending on your concentration level. Half hour even is good. 45 minutes for me is my bare minimum to get warmed up, because I need that time just to get connected with my guitar and the feel of the strings and the pick. And it depends on what guitar I'm playing, so I use a scale to do that. Then after that, I'll go through a couple of songs. I'll start to learn the chord progressions of maybe a couple songs I have to teach my students for that day. And I'll just go through the changes and double check to make sure I got the changes. I might even write a chart out, a rhythm chart out, which will also connect me and warm me up too musically. Sometimes practice can be done mentally, like I said, by listening to your songs as you're driving to work or back from work or at lunchtime. Things like that are good to practice. Sometimes practicing mentally here, listening to what you want to learn before you actually attempt it. Listen to it first. Listen to the advice. Listen to the scale that you're trying to learn. Singing the scales. Sing them when you're busy at work, if you're allowed to sing at work, because you're not in a restaurant that's really quiet or something and you like to sing. You're working somewhere where you can sing. To sing songs that you're wanting to learn to play, or sing the riffs that you're wanting to learn to play, or even thinking of the chord changes when you're listening to a song as you're driving down the road and going, okay, I know that's a G, that's an E minor, that's a C, and learning to call out the chords, or learning the chords and then having a little chord chart, and as you're listening to the song, pointing to chord changes as they happen in the song. Those are all good ways of practicing. You have to divvy up your time, depending on how much time you have. I would say that if your dexterity is lacking, that you'd want to spend a good portion of your time with your scales. Like if your fingers are really slow and your coordination between your right hand and your left hand aren't very good, that you would want to practice more with the scales than anything to get your hand moving and to get the coordination between your right and your left hand happening. And it'll improve your chords too, because practicing scales will definitely improve your accuracy of your chords and the strength in your hand. And I like what Zach Wild said. He says, oh, some days with all the responsibilities, I got a business meeting here, and then, then the old lady tells me I got to take out the trash, and then I got to pick up the kids from school. And he goes, by the time the day's over, I haven't had any time to practice. It's been so busy. And he says, so I practice whatever I can every day. He says, some days I get in 6 hours, some days I get 10 minutes. But on those days when I only get 10 minutes in, I look at it this way. I'm 10 minutes better today than I was yesterday. So put in as much time as you can and make the time count. Don't be watching a YouTube video on something that's not relevant to what you're trying to learn. Don't distract yourself. Put yourself in a room where nobody's going to bother you, even if it's for 10 minutes. You'll learn more that way. Focus on what you're doing. Don't be distracted. Okay, it's been a pleasure. If you're interested in really learning how to play, this is just a little sample of what I like to do. You could check out my site at riffninja.com. And don't forget to subscribe. And thanks a lot for your time. We'll see you soon.